I'm going to come next to Deputy Prime Minister Qubad Taalăbani, because, of course, one of the aspects of Iraq's diversity is that things sometimes look different from Erbil or Soleimani than they do from Baghdad or from Basra. So maybe you'd just like to talk a little bit about the questions of Iraq's diversity and geography, and whether that is a curse or a blessing, looking at it from a Kurdish perspective.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. And really delighted to be on this panel with amazing speakers and good friends. Look, it's up to Iraq whether it wants to look at this as a strength or a weakness. If it wants to look at it as a weakness and as a headache and as a problem, it can. If it wants to look at its geographic positioning as an asset, as a strength, as a possibility to maneuver, it can also do that. So it really depends on the country, on the government of the country, and of the subcomponents of the country. We've seen just in this recent war how it's been both. As Mina said, Iraq lashed out at many countries, but there were also people like the Kurds who also did a lot of behind the scenes negotiating and de-escalating, just because we could speak to so many different actors. I think the thing that Iraq probably hasn't realized yet is there are very few countries like it. Everybody wants to have a good relationship with Iraq. East, West, European, American, China, Russia, the region. Everybody wants to have a good relationship with Iraq. So if Iraq was strategic, it would want to have a good relationship with everybody.
So look, with that sort of idea that there is something to work with here that is to Iraq's benefit, but it's incredibly complex, maybe I could come back to Qubad to just give us some idea of, having lived through the last couple of months, the way Baghdad has responded. How has that impacted on Kurdistan region's situation, and particularly your relationships with your specific neighbors, Turkey and Iran?
The war impacted Kurdistan significantly and in a negative way. Not only were we attacked, where our security was threatened, but economically, I think we've suffered more because of the stopping of the trade, the lack of oil exports. It's had a massive economic impact on the Kurdistan region, as it has had on Iraq. But again, I think kind of tying it into your first question, I think Kurdistan, by and large, was able to utilize its strategic positioning to speak to the Iranians, to speak to the Turks, to be in touch with the government in Baghdad, to speak to the United States and other friendly powers like the UK and France and others during this process. And I think we were able to utilize our relations and our strategic positioning and maintained a very neutral policy. We were very, very open and transparent with everybody. We were against this war. This war was not good for Iraq, not good for Kurdistan. And we're hoping that this ceasefire will stick and that there will be a lasting deal. And I think this will also be very helpful to the new government that is being formed in Iraq as we speak. And it will give the new government an opportunity to maybe rectify some of the wrongs that Iraq did, whether it's a subgroup of Iraq or was it the government? Yeah. That's it's a very obviously a very complex dynamic, but ultimately a government is to represent the country. And if there are subgroups or groups working against the state from within the state, it is still the state's responsibility to deal with them. We have now an opportunity with a new government, hopefully, fingers crossed, will form that it can address some of these issues. And again, look at its positioning and be strategic. Iraq has no need to have problems with any of its neighbors. It can do trade with them. It can be part of massive economic growth, massive deals whether they're energy, whether they're the development roads. So we just all need to be strategic and move beyond any specific ideological baggage that we may have and we may have held over for the last few hundred years.
Yes. There used to be a saying a couple of hundred years ago in Ireland, when Ireland and Great Britain were united for a short period of time, that England's difficulty was Ireland's opportunity. Now, do you think Baghdad's difficulty is Erbil's opportunity in any way? Is there any upside for the Kurdistan?
No, absolutely not. I'm of the belief that a failed Iraq does not lead to a successful Kurdistan. I don't think everybody in Kurdistan sees it this way, but certainly my party, the PUK, myself, we look at this opportunity. A strong Iraq is good for Kurdistan. A strong Iraq is going to be good for Kurdistan's economy. And a strong Iraq does not exclude Kurdistan. A strong Iraq includes Kurdistan. And we think Iraq will be strong if we are there, if we're at the seat in Baghdad, if we are helping making the strategic decisions. For too long, we have stood on the outside looking in and have looked at ourselves as a different country or a different component. And we've looked at Baghdad more of as a transactional relationship. Well, I'll do this for you and you do this for me. And that hasn't worked as we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. We have made a strategic decision. We will be in Baghdad. We are in Baghdad. President of the PUK is in Baghdad right now because that's where the decisions are going to be made. That's where the direction of the country is going to be made. And we can't complain if we are there, right? If we're outside of the system and then the country does something we don't like, well, we need to be in Baghdad. We need to be there where the decisions are made and help steer the country in the direction that it could go, that it should go. So I, again, strongly disagree with the notion that a weak Baghdad means a strong Kurdistan.
Thank you. I think Iran was quite happy to have a stable Iraq, certainly not a strong Iraq or an Iraq that would threaten Iranian interests, but it needed, and it would judge, this would go up and down, it would need freedom of maneuver, both in its relationship with its proxies and allies and financially and smuggling of energy and other commodities. To sustain its interests. So it needed a permissive environment, and therefore it was very influential with Iraqi governments. That didn't mean that Iraq couldn't negotiate what Iran was allowed to do through and with Iraq, and it would go up and down in terms of the level of Iranian influence. Now, after what's just happened, and particularly in this ongoing no peace, no war, attritional, possibly years-long conflict, I think Iran is going to be very demanding of what it does in and through and with Iraq, and that is going to pose a great challenge for an Iraqi government that is trying to avoid just being a powerless battlefield for other regional powers. So I think we ought to address, again, what can an Iraqi government do? Because I think with the US messaging and the Gulf messaging and European messaging, what we would love to see is an Iraq that restores its sovereignty, says we have to have a good relationship with Iran, but that we will choose to develop relations with all countries in the region and beyond, according to our interest. But I just don't think Iraq is powerful enough to do that right now. It might be able to work towards that. It might be able to take steps towards that. And I think that means that a lot of countries are going to be very suspicious and skeptical about the new government in Iraq and what it can do to rescue its foreign policy from the effects of its relationship with Iran. But Qubad, tell us a little bit about how you see Iraq's relationship with Iran now we've gone through this period of conflict.
I think I will take you back just a little bit before the conflict. I saw numerous instances, even before the conflict, where the political power brokers in Iraq didn't obey Iran. We go back to when the Speaker of Parliament was appointed. The Speaker of Iran wanted a different Speaker of Parliament. went to many of the Shiite parties and said, we don't want this person, we would like this person. Iraq and the Iraqi political parties and the Shiite political parties picked the candidate that they had reached an agreement on to pick. When the framework nominated former Prime Minister Maliki to be the next Prime Minister, and President Trump put his tweet out, that put Iraq in a really difficult position to choose one or the other. Well, I think that Maliki wouldn't have been picked even if there had not been this war. Obviously, the fact that there was this war definitely put an end to Maliki's claim. So I think that we had seen signs, and we will continue to see signs of Iraq's emerging independence. It does not mean Iraq is going to work against Iran's interests. Absolutely not. But it means on certain decisions that are in Iraq's interest, Iraqis have proven to be able to make, and when I say Iraqis, let me be more specific. Shiite political parties in Iraq have been able to make decisions that have been Iraqi. And I think this has been somewhat overlooked, and it's been very easy for us to paint all the Shiites as extensions of Iranian foreign policy. And I think that hasn't been fair. And what we're seeing now in Iraq is an emerging new leadership that is younger, that is more cross-ethnic and cross-sectarian, that have been having really strong, deep discussions about the future of the country, about Iraq's relationships with the West, with Iran, the issue of the militias. These kinds of discussions are very deep, are very advanced, and are very kind of, I would say, giving me a much more optimistic view about how Iraq is going to manage these relationships going forward. Does that mean they're going to turn their backs on Iran? No, absolutely not. I think that we'll expect to see more balance, and maybe balance isn't the right word, independence. I think we'll see more independence coming out of Iraq, and especially in this next government.
Lutfi Al-Wafi from Iraqi Glory Alliance. After talking about militias in Iraq and restoring the sovereignty of the government, which previous governments has failed doing that. Now, I think resolving the militias is not something going to be easy or doable to the current government or the political parties that actually involved in the operation, political operation, simply because they have formed these militias. Now, do you think that the new Prime Minister, Mr. Az-Zaidi, is going to make that happen? The other thing is, now the new government in Iraq, and we keep saying new government in Iraq, every 4 years, well, technically every 6 years, it's the same parties, same people, same everybody, same faces, same all. We're just moving spots of people. What do you think the solution for that?
Okay, I mean, the one thing I would note is that we've had, if you like, this Iraqi establishment, this political establishment, with all the issues of corruption and failure to progress in various ways. But actually, on the foreign policy issues in relationship with the region, I think they have achieved some progress. So, the question is, under the specific challenges of now, are they going to be able to raise the diplomatic game, I think. But I'm going to give the panel a chance to have a final word. I'm actually going to abuse Chair's privilege just one more time, just say something about Syria. So I spend a lot of my time on the ground in Syria, again, promoting business and private sector development. And I think it's very important to note that there is what's really new in Iraq's neighborhood, actually, are not the issues with Iran or even, Israel, Iran, and US, Iran. It is this new government in Syria. And while initially, and quite understandably, there was a concern among many in Iraq that this would be an al-Qaeda-light regime, that it would be a sectarian threat, that it would probably fail and would produce chaos or at least negative repercussions, I actually find that their attitude is, we are weak, we must build constructive relations with all our neighbors, including Israel, and that they look at Iraq as a potential economic and commercial partner. There's already security cooperation, obviously, against Islamic State, against Daesh. And I think it's just worth pointing out that I think there is an opportunity there that's worth looking at. Now, we know that since the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, Iraq has trucked some oil across Syria. There's some other exports that are going across the newly opened border crossings. But I do say to everybody here that maybe has concerns in the back of their mind, it's worth actually going to Damascus now and engaging with the seniors, including those at the heart of the regime. I think you'll find a very, very pragmatic, business-orientated, honest appraisal. We are weak. We are too poor to get involved in political and regional conflicts and sectarian conflicts. We need to build the partnerships quickly. So I just mentioned that on behalf of Syria. So I'm going to ask the panel to quickly sum up. We only have a couple of minutes left. Qubad, would you like to say anything finally to the topic of Iraq and the region?
I think I would just like to address the last question. I think there is a change. I think there is a change there's a changing of the guard happening in Iraq as we speak. There is a new generation, a younger generation of leaders that are emerging, that are cross-sectarian, that are talking about things in a different way to the old guard. They're very respectful to the old guard, but there is a new cell that is emerging. Go back four years ago and have a massive issue such as the presidency of Iraq. Can you imagine Prime Minister Maliki and President Masoud Barzani opposing something and it going through? 4 years ago, absolutely impossible. Today, it goes through because of this new leadership, because of these new linkages and new coalitions that are building. And I think this is different. And a lot of these guys who are now very influential in Iraq are all roughly the same age. They're in their early 50s, some even younger. We've got an incredibly young prime minister, designate right now. So I'm seeing a changing of the guard, which I think will bring in a different way of thinking, a more governance-focused mentality, and a lot to be optimistic about. So I don't think it's fair just to say, well, it's just the same faces, same ministers, same policies. No, you're going to see Qais Khazali today is not the Qais Khazali of 4 years ago, and that. Let's just call it as it is.
He may not yet be invited to next year's iteration of the but